It was a beautiful day when the Benson family, Mike and Clara, along with their 3 children, Tommy, the eldest boy, Lucy, the middle child, and little Ella, the youngest, moved into their new home. The house was charming, nestled at the edge of a quiet town, surrounded by tall, ancient trees that seemed to whisper in the wind. Clara had always dreamed of owning a house like this, a large, cozy space where they could build lasting memories. They were unaware, however, that the house had been abandoned for over 50 years, and its history was far from ordinary. The moment they entered, Clara felt a chill, but she brushed it off as the natural reaction to a new place. Mike, ever the optimist, reassured her that everything would be fine. Tommy and Lucy ran around excitedly, claiming rooms, while little Ella clung to her mother, sensing something unsettling about the place but unable to articulate it. The first night, as the family settled in, they noticed something strange. The house creaked, and faint whispers could be heard from the walls, but it was easy to blame it on the house's age or the wind outside. But that night, as they drifted to sleep, things began to change. It started with small things. Ella was the first to notice. As she lay in bed, clutching her stuffed bear, she heard soft footsteps in the hallway. She sat up, wide-eyed, and peered through the crack in her door. The hallway was empty, but the sounds continued. A door creaked open, then closed. She called out to her siblings, but Tommy and Lucy, already asleep, didn't stir. She crawled out of bed and tiptoed into their room. "Tommy, Lucy, do you hear that?" she whispered urgently. The sounds grew louder, and a cold breeze swept through the room. The children's breath turned visible, though it was a warm summer night. Tommy, half awake, groaned and pulled the covers over his head, but Lucy was already sitting up, looking horrified. "It's not just the wind, it's something else," she muttered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from downstairs. It was the sound of furniture being overturned, followed by heavy footsteps. Clara and Mike woke up in a panic. "What's happening?" Mike asked, rushing out of their bedroom. The hallway was completely dark, and the air felt suffocating. They could hear strange scraping noises, like claws dragging across the wooden floor. The family huddled together, trying to make sense of what was happening. The temperature in the house had dropped drastically, and their breath fogged in front of them. The next day, Mike went into the basement to check the furnace, hoping to find a logical explanation for the strange noises. As he descended the creaky steps, the air grew heavier, and the light from his flashlight flickered. The basement was cold, colder than it should have been, with an odd musty smell lingering in the air. As he scanned the room, his light fell upon an old, dust-covered mirror leaning against the far wall. Curious, he approached the mirror. As his hand brushed the dust away, he saw something in the reflection that made his blood run cold. Behind him, there was a shadowy figure, a woman, dressed in a faded white gown, her face twisted in an expression of agony. He spun around, but no one was there. His heart raced as he backed away from the mirror, but the figure remained in the reflection. Suddenly, the lights flickered out completely, plunging him into darkness. The whispering voices began again, low and distant at first, then louder and more frantic. Mike ran upstairs, pale and shaking, his mind racing. He told Clara what he had seen, but she was skeptical, thinking it might have been a trick of the light. That night, however, it became impossible to deny. That night, the house became alive with unexplainable horrors. Tommy, lying in his bed, heard scratching at his window. When he looked out, there was nothing but darkness.
Yet the scratching continued. The noises from the basement intensified, and the temperature plummeted to an unbearable cold. Ella, who had always been sensitive to the supernatural, woke up crying. "Mommy, Daddy, the lady is back. She's in my room," she screamed, her voice breaking. Clara rushed to Ella's room, but when she entered, the room was empty. Ella was standing by the window, staring out into the night. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across her face, and her eyes were wide with terror. "What lady, sweetie? There's no one here," Clara said, trying to comfort her daughter. Ella's voice quivered as she whispered, "The lady with the pale face. She says we're not supposed to be here. She says we have to leave." Clara's heart sank. She tried to reassure Ella, but the fear in her daughter's eyes told her otherwise. They needed to leave, before it was too late. The following night, things escalated beyond imagination. Tommy was in the bathroom when he saw something move in the reflection of the mirror, his own face twisted into a grotesque grin, one that wasn't his own. Screaming, he turned around, but no one was there. In the living room, the family heard a loud crash followed by a series of unearthly screams. The walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Clara's face went pale as she turned to Mike, but he was already gone, rushing to the basement again, convinced there was something important down there. Ella stood in the corner, her eyes locked on something in the distance. Her body trembled, and her lips moved in silent prayer. The house felt alive with something malignant, its walls groaning, the whispers growing louder. Mike's voice came from the basement, strained and frantic. "Clara, you have to come down here. Now." Clara and the children ran to the basement stairs, but as they descended, the air turned thick, oppressive. The temperature dropped so low that Clara's teeth began to chatter. At the foot of the stairs, Mike was standing frozen, his eyes wide with terror. Behind him stood the figure, a woman in a torn white dress, her long hair hanging in front of her face. "Get out," the woman hissed, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You don't belong here." Before Clara could respond, the woman lunged forward, but just as she did, Ella stepped forward, her small hands raised. She spoke in a voice that was not her own, an ancient language Clara couldn't understand. The woman recoiled, her face twisting in pain. The house began to shake violently, and the whispers turned into an unbearable roar. In a sudden burst of energy, Ella cried out, "Leave us alone." The figure let out a shriek, and with a flash of light, she was gone. The house fell silent, and the temperature returned to normal. The next morning, the Benson family was gone. Ella returned to the town many years later, a woman who would never speak of the horrors she had witnessed. But whenever she passed that house, she would pause for a moment, her eyes scanning the windows. For deep inside, she knew that the whispers never truly stopped. They waited for the next family.